You ever notice how some folks just refuse to learn their lesson, no matter how many times life tries to teach it to them? Yeah, well, that's exactly how I found myself standing on my own dock one Monday morning, coffee in hand, staring at the spot where my 24-foot pontoon boat used to be, just a ragged mooring line and a laminated sheet of paper left in its place. Red letters. Vessel removed per HOA violation. Oversized watercraft. Contact the board office. That's when I knew, right down to my bones, that this wasn't just about a boat. Christine Pembroke, the reigning queen of our local HOA, thought she owned the whole lake. Bless her heart, she didn't know what was coming. Sunlight was just creeping through the old oaks lining my shoreline, dew still on the grass, air crisp enough that I actually appreciated the jacket I'd thrown on. I've walked that gravel path every morning for 8 years since I bought my grandfather's place. 15 acres of peace and stubbornness on the south end of what everyone calls Lake Meadows. Only this morning, the usual serenity was broken by the emptiness where my boat should have been. I picked up that bright orange notice, read the legalese, and right there at the bottom was Christine's signature, neat as a pin. She'd had my boat hauled off at dawn. Let me back up a sec. I'm Connor Whitfield, 47, retired Army Corps of Engineers. 20 years spent wrangling water management projects taught me patience and the value of paperwork. Trust me, most problems in life can be solved if you're willing to dig through enough files and follow the rules. So, instead of calling Christine to raise hell, I finished my coffee, walked back up to the house, and got out my grandfather's old document box, the one he told me years ago never to lose. I bought this place back in 2016 after he passed. The land north of me, Lakeside Meadows, was chopped into 150 lots back in the 90s, complete with winding roads, matching mailboxes, and eventually a shiny new HOA by 2009. They had cookouts and boat parades, and I mostly kept to myself, which drove Christine up a wall. Over the years, she'd email me about my rather large boat not fitting the community aesthetic, and every time I politely remind her my property isn't part of the HOA. It never stuck. Now, seeing my boat gone, I call the impound company. Some lady confirmed, yes, my vessel was towed per Christine's request, and if I wanted it back, I need to pay $85 a day for storage. But that wasn't the part that got me. It was the confidence, the assumption that she had the right to touch my property at all. And that's when I remembered my grandfather's words, plain as day. Don't ever lose that paper, Connor. That's the truth, right there. So I dug out the document box, and let me tell you, it was like opening a time capsule. Old deeds, survey maps, even the original blueprints for the dam my grandfather built in '54. He bought land with a creek, built his own dam, and created a 12-acre lake. Not some happy accident of nature. The deed was clear. Whoever owned this land owned the water. The kicker? When he sold 35 acres to a developer in '95, he kept the land with the lake, the dam, and all water rights. No mention of shared access. No easement. No nothing. The developer, and later the HOA, just assumed. I called an old surveyor buddy, Davis, and a property lawyer named Hartwell. Then, only then, did I drive over to the HOA office to give Christine a chance to explain herself. You know, the kind of person who thrives on control, has a binder for everything, probably color-coded her sock drawer? That's Christine. She's also a real estate agent, which explains a lot. I walked into her office, smelled like lavender and too much ambition, and she greeted me like she'd just been waiting to pounce. I told her as calm as I could. My boat was towed. Care to explain? She just leaned back, all steepled fingers and smugness, and rattled off her spiel about community covenants, boat size limits, and how the lake was under their jurisdiction. My house isn't part of the HOA. Your rules don't apply to me, I said. She gave me that tight little smile. Your dock is on the lake, Mr. Whitfield. Our lake. I asked if she had any documentation proving HOA ownership of the lake, and you'd think I'd slapped her. She just insisted. That's how it's always been. That's the thing about assumptions. They feel true right up until they crash into the facts. I told her I'd pay the impound fees, but I'd also be bringing in a surveyor and a lawyer. If you have any documents proving your authority, now's the time to find them. She called after me that I was harassing the board. Yeah, that happened. By the time I got my boat back, after paying for 4 days of storage, even though it had only been gone since that morning, word was spreading like wildfire. I barely made it up to the house before Christine blasted a mass email to the HOA, banning all non-member boats from the lake and threatening $500 a day fines. She'd thrown down the gauntlet, publicly. Bad move. That night, I went through every document in that metal box. Next morning, I was at the county recorder's office when the doors opened. 2 hours later, I had everything I needed: deeds, surveys, legal descriptions, each one a nail in the coffin of Christine's assumptions. I showed Davis my surveyor, and he whistled when he saw how much of the community beach actually sat on my land. He said he'd have his crew out to mark the property lines by Friday. Hartwell, the attorney, looked at my stack of documents and told me flat out, "You own the lake." No question. He drafted a cease and desist letter, certified mail, and recommended filing a trespassing complaint with the sheriff. The numbers he floated for back compensation made my head spin, but I told him all I wanted was recognition and maybe a little respect for what my grandfather built. Survey day, Davis and his guys arrived, pounding bright orange stakes along the line. By 9:30, a crowd was gathering on the HOA beach, whispering, pointing. And sure enough, here came Christine, marching across the grass, face set, voice sharp. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I kept it calm. "Legal survey, routine procedure. If you don't like it, hire your own." She tried to argue established community use. I pulled out the 1995 deed and offered it to her. She wouldn't even look at it, just kept insisting, "No judge is going to let you steal a lake from 150 families." Thing is, I wasn't stealing anything. I was just finally drawing the line, literally and figuratively. That night, the emergency HOA meeting was standing room only. Christine painted me as a villain, some greedy outsider trying to rob the community of their lake. Then she handed me the mic. I let the documents do the talking, showed everyone the deeds, the surveys, explained how assumptions don't trump county records. It got quiet in there real quick. A few residents asked fair questions. What about all the years we've used the lake? Doesn't that count? I explained adverse possession, 20 years required, not 15, and since I was asserting my rights now, the clock was stopped cold. Ted, the treasurer, and Diane, another board member, looked like the rug had just been yanked out from under them. Residents started asking Christine hard questions. Why didn't you check the deeds? Why didn't the developer tell us? By the time I finished, I wasn't the villain anymore. People were mad, just not at me. The board asked me to meet again, this time to talk terms. The next few days, the neighborhood shifted. More whispers, more side-eye glances, some folks standing in clusters by the water. Then Ted and Diane reached out, wanting to meet without Christine. Over coffee, they confessed. They checked my documents with their own lawyer and realized Christine had led them right into a brick wall. They planned to resign rather than drag the HOA into bankruptcy, fighting a lawsuit they couldn't win. Of course, that didn't stop someone from vandalizing my private property signs the next night. Spray paint, angry words, the works. Deputy Harris, the young sheriff's deputy, started keeping an eye on things. Then a woman named Karen Hughes, representing a group of 20 families, approached me to negotiate an easement, $15,000, a household for permanent lake access, just to avoid the whole mess. I was impressed by their pragmatism, so we started paperwork for individual agreements. Meanwhile, Christine doubled down, calling for a mandatory meeting to authorize a lawsuit, only to be blindsided when half the room called for her removal. She lost the vote 87-12, packed up, and left. Never saw her at another meeting again. Within a week, Franklin Ross, a retired engineer and the new interim president, reached out to open negotiations. Their attorney, Patricia, came in all business. We hashed out a 5-year lease, $50,000 a year for defined lake access, maintenance responsibilities, quarterly payments, the works. For the 20 families who'd acted early, I honored their individual easements. The rest, the lease. Fair, above board, and recorded with the county. By the time the contract was signed, It had been exactly a month since my boat got towed. I walked down to the lake and saw a brand new wooden sign, Lake Whitfield Community Beach. Access by agreement with property owner. Please respect all rules. My name, right there where everyone could see it. Not for ego, just recognition that fact had finally beaten fiction. The lease payments hit my account, and you better believe I put the first chunk into lake health. Got a management company out to handle algae and stock fish, fixed up the dam, even started reinforcing things for the next generation. Life settled into a new normal. Franklin turned out to be a great board president. Ask questions, read the fine print, no more assumptions. The water got clearer, fishing improved, and the kids could swim without worry. Sometimes, folks would wave from their kayaks, thank me for how it turned out. Other times, I'd get an email asking for copies of the paperwork. People wanting to see the truth for themselves. Christine? Last I heard, she sold her house and moved out. Ran into her once at a grocery store in another town, but she left before I could say hello. Pride, I guess, is a heavy thing to carry. And on quiet mornings, I'd sit where my grandfather once did, watching the sunrise on water he built, coffee in hand, thinking about all the things that change and all the things that never do. The dam still stands, the water's still here, and the documents my grandfather warned me to keep close, well, they did their job. In a world full of loud opinions and wishful thinking, sometimes all you need is a quiet truth and the patience to let it speak. So if you stuck with me through this story, thanks. Let me know down in the comments where you're watching from, or if you've ever had to stand your ground against a wall of assumptions. What's your take? Should documentation beat decades of tradition? Did justice win here, or did it just get lucky? Hit that subscribe. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always comes out in the end. And remember, when it comes to land, water, and family, always know where your boundaries are and never, ever lose the paperwork.